Everyone abandoned the dying alien child in the street. Everyone except the humans, the most feared predator species in the galaxy. Dylan Scorer sprinted down the neon-lit alley, his combat boots pounding the metal pavement. In his muscular arms he clutched a bleeding Pandronian child. The alien girl's name was Nox. She had iridescent purple scales, large orange eyes filled with terror, and deep lacerations oozing luminescent blue blood. An enraged mob of Pandronians pursued close behind, shouting slurs and death threats at the human who dared to interfere in their world. Their cries grew louder and more frenzied with each passing second. To them, it was unthinkable that a human, a species renowned as violent predators, would dare to touch one of their kind. But Dylan blocked out their screams, ignoring even the acidic burn of the alien child's blood on his hands. All that mattered was getting Nox to the human embassy, where she could receive the critical medical care she needed to survive. If he failed, an innocent alien child would die from her wounds, and any hope of building trust between humans and Pandronians would die with her. The hatred between their kinds would only grow, leading to war on a galactic scale. Billions would perish. Everything depended on this moment, this act of compassion in the face of contempt. One human's choice to protect an alien girl that everyone else had abandoned and left for dead. Dylan's mind flashed back to the events that led him to this moment, sprinting through the neon-lit streets of the Pandronian capital with a bleeding alien child in his arms. Just a few months ago, he had been a respected soldier in the Human Federation's elite peacekeeping forces. But during a tense standoff on a war-torn planet, his commanding officer had given the order to open fire on a crowd of unarmed civilians, men, women, children, innocents caught in the crossfire of a conflict they never asked for. Dylan had refused, unable to reconcile the indiscriminate slaughter of non-combatants with his moral code. For his insubordination, he was dishonorably discharged, his once promising military career in shambles. Disillusioned and adrift, Dylan had accepted a position as a security officer at the human embassy on the Pandronian homeworld, hoping for a fresh start. But he quickly discovered that the Pandronians, despite their advanced technology, were a deeply xenophobic species. They barely tolerated the human presence on their planet, viewing them as primitive, violent savages due to their omnivorous diet and history of conflict. Tensions between the two races always simmered just beneath the surface, ready to boil over at the slightest provocation. As Dylan made his nightly rounds near the embassy, his enhanced hearing picked up a commotion from a nearby alley. Screams of pain and cruel laughter echoed off the metal walls. Rushing to investigate, Dylan stumbled upon a scene of unimaginable brutality. A gang of teenage Pandronians surrounded a small, helpless figure curled up on the ground. Nox's iridescent purple scales were torn and bleeding, her bioluminescent blood pooling on the pavement. The assailants kicked and slashed at her with their venomous claws, hurling insults and accusations. "Half-breed abomination," one of them snarled, his orange eyes blazing with hatred. "You don't belong here." Without hesitation, Dylan leaped into action. His extensive close combat training took over as he incapacitated the attackers with swift, precise strikes. The gang quickly scattered, fleeing into the shadowy depths of the alley. Dylan knelt beside Nox, gathering her broken body into his arms. She was badly injured, her breaths coming in shallow, rapid gasps. He knew she needed immediate medical attention, but he also realized the Pandronian authorities would likely blame the victim and let the perpetrators go free. In that moment, Dylan made a split-second decision. He would bring Nox to the embassy where she could receive the care she so desperately needed. The potential diplomatic fallout was a risk he was willing to take. As he ran through the streets, Nox's blood staining his uniform, an angry mob began to form behind them. Pandronian bystanders pointed and shouted, their faces contorted with rage and disgust. The very sight of a human touching a Pandronian child, even to save her life, was an unforgivable offense in their eyes. Dylan sprinted through the embassy gates, Nox's small body growing heavy in his arms. The enraged mob of Pandronians stayed hot on his heels until the emergency force field snapped into place with a crackle of energy, sealing the compound. The human doctors in the medical bay reeled back in shock as Dylan burst through the doors. "She needs help now," he barked, laying Nox on the nearest exam table. Her iridescent scales were slick with luminescent blood. The medical team leapt into action, attaching monitoring devices and preparing IVs of specialized fluids to stabilize the critically injured alien child. They cut away the tattered remains of Nox's clothing to access her wounds. Dylan stepped back, his heart pounding, praying they weren't too late. "What the hell is going on here, Scorer?" a sharp voice demanded from behind. Dylan turned to face Ambassador Eliza Novak, a formidable woman in her 50s with steel-grey hair and a hawkish gaze. Her eyes flicked from Dylan's blood-soaked uniform to Nox's unconscious form. "Ambassador, I can explain—" "You better have a damn good reason for bringing a Pandronian child into this embassy," Novak snapped, her voice rising. "Do you have any idea how many protocols you've violated? The political shitstorm this could cause?" "I couldn't just stand there and let them beat her to death," Dylan cried, his fists clenched at his sides. "She's an innocent kid. I had to do something." Novak pinched the bridge of her nose, sighing heavily. "Your heart's in the right place, Scorer. But this could have severe repercussions for the embassy, for humanity standing on—" A chime from the wall-mounted view screen interrupted her. Novak tapped the screen, her face going rigid as she saw the incoming transmission's source. The screen filled with the enraged face of a male Pandronian, his orange eyes blazing with fury. "Ambassador Novak," he hissed, baring his needle-sharp teeth, "I am Zarkol of the Ministry of Purity. You will release the abomination to us immediately." "I'm afraid I don't understand," Novak replied coolly. "We are providing urgent medical care to an injured child. Surely you can't expect us to—" "That thing is no child," Zarkol snarled. "It is a half-breed, a genetic atrocity born of a forbidden union between a Pandronian and a lesser species. Under our laws, such impurities must be cleansed to maintain the superiority of the Pandronian genome." Dylan's stomach turned. They wanted to execute Nox for the crime of existing. "You can't be serious," he growled, stepping into view. "She's just a little girl." Zarkol's eyes narrowed. "You will hand over the abomination for purification, human. Your interference is a direct violation of our sovereignty." Novak squared her shoulders. "The embassy is considered human soil, Minister Zarkol. The child is under our protection now." Zarkol's scales rippled with barely contained rage. "You will regret defying our laws, Ambassador. There will be consequences." The screen went black. Novak turned to Dylan, her expression grim. "I hope you're ready to deal with the fallout of this, Scorer, because we're in for one hell of a ride." Alarms blared through the embassy as the compound went into lockdown. Beyond the walls, the angry mob of Pandronians howled for blood, their clawed fists pounding against the force fields. Dylan swallowed hard, wondering if his impulsive act of compassion had just doomed them all. In the sterile confines of the medical bay, Nox's large orange eyes fluttered open. Disoriented and afraid, she thrashed against the restraints holding her to the exam table, her high-pitched cries echoing off the metal walls. The human doctors stepped back, their hands raised in a non-threatening gesture. Dylan pushed past them, rushing to Nox's side. He leaned close, his voice a soothing rumble as he spoke in halting Pandronian. "Shh, it's okay. You're safe now. No one's going to hurt you." Nox recoiled, her scales rippling with fear at the sight of the strange, pale-skinned creature looming over her. She'd heard stories of the humans, the savage predators from beyond the stars, but as she stared into Dylan's warm, brown eyes, she saw only kindness and concern. Slowly, tentatively, Nox relaxed. Dylan smiled, gently taking her small clawed hand in his own. As the unlikely pair began to bond, Ambassador Novak strode into her office, the lines of her face deepening as she read the urgent message on her desk's holographic display. The Interstellar Council, at the Pandronians' behest, was demanding Nox's immediate surrender. Novak barely had time to process the Council's threat of sanctions when Dylan burst in, his expression thunderous. "You can't seriously be considering handing her over," he growled, slamming his fist on the desk. "It's a death sentence." Novak held up a hand, her eyes weary. "I don't like it any more than you do, Skora, but we have to consider the bigger picture. If we defy the Council, it could jeopardize humanity's standing on a galactic scale." Dylan leaned forward, his gaze intense. "Nox is an innocent child. If we abandon her now, we're no better than the Pandronians. We have to stand for something, Ambassador. Otherwise, what's the point of any of this?" Novak was silent for a long moment, the weight of the decision heavy on her shoulders. Finally, she straightened, her jaw set with resolve. She turned to the view screen, opening a channel to Earth. "This is Ambassador Novak. I'm informing you that I will not comply with the order to surrender the Pandronian child. We cannot, in good conscience, condemn an innocent to death. If this means facing consequences, then so be it." The response was swift and unequivocal. "Ambassador, you are risking not only your career but the stability of our entire diplomatic mission. I strongly urge you to reconsider." Novak cut the transmission, her eyes hard as flint. She turned to Dylan, her voice low and urgent. "Skora, I'm placing Nox's safety in your hands. Get her off-world, whatever it takes. We don't have much time." Dylan nodded, his mind already racing with possibilities. He would need a ship, supplies, a way to slip past the Pandronian blockade. But he would make it happen, no matter the cost. Outside the embassy walls, the angry mob swelled, their cries for retribution rising to a deafening roar. And at the front of the horde stood Zarkol, his eyes glinting with cold, implacable fury as he waited for the humans to surrender their prize. In the heart of the human embassy, Dylan moved with purpose, his mind racing as he finalized the details of his daring plan. He turned to Nox, kneeling before her. "We're getting you out of here, kid, but you have to trust me." Nox nodded, her orange eyes wide with fear and hope. Dylan quickly dressed her in human clothing, concealing her iridescent scales and bioluminescent blood. He affixed a holographic mask over her face, transforming her alien features into those of a human child. With Nox's hand clasped tightly in his, Dylan strode towards the embassy gates, his heart pounding against his ribs. As they approached the security checkpoint, a guard held up a hand. "Hold it, Skora. What's going on here?" Dylan forced a smile. "My daughter's sick. I'm taking her to an off-world hospital for treatment." The guard's eyes narrowed, flicking from Dylan's face to Nox's disguised form. After a tense moment, he waved them through. "Make it quick." Dylan and Nox hurried through the gates, the Pandronian mob's cries fading behind them. But as they neared the spaceport, a squadron of Pandronian security forces emerged from the shadows, weapons trained on the pair. At their head stood Zarkol, his scales rippling with barely contained rage. "Did you really think you could deceive us, human?" he snarled, taking a step forward. "Hand over the abomination, now!" Dylan pushed Nox behind him, shielding her with his body. "I won't let you hurt her. She's under my protection." Zarkol's lips curled back, revealing needle-sharp teeth. "You have no authority here, human. This is our world, our law. The half-breed must be purified." Dylan stood his ground, his eyes hard as flint. "I'll die before I let you touch her." The Pandronian forces closed in, their weapons humming with deadly energy. Zarkol's finger tightened on the trigger. "That can be arranged." Just as the standoff reached its breaking point, the roar of engines filled the air. A sleek diplomatic shuttle descended from the sky, landing between Dylan and the Pandronians. The hatch hissed open, revealing Ambassador Novak and a contingent of heavily armed human security personnel. Novak strode forward, her gaze locked on Zarkol. "Stand down, Minister. By order of the Interstellar Council, the child has been granted asylum on a neutral world." Zarkol's eyes blazed with fury. "You dare interfere in our affairs? This means war, Ambassador. Humanity will pay for its insolence." Novak's lips curved in a cold smile. I think not. She held up a datapad, its screen flickering to life. The Council has reviewed evidence of your government's long history of genetic experimentation and atrocities against so-called inferior species. Your hypocrisy has been exposed. Zarkol's scales paled as images of twisted experiments and mass graves filled the screen. Murmurs of shock and disgust rippled through the gathered crowd. "You have a choice, Minister," Novak continued. "Allow the child to leave with us or face the consequences of your actions on a galactic stage." Zarkol's claws clenched, his eyes darting between the damning evidence and the human forces. With a snarl of rage, he signaled his troops to lower their weapons. "Take the abomination and go," he spat, "but this is not over." As the Pandronians retreated, Dylan and Nox boarded the waiting shuttle. Nox turned to Dylan, throwing her arms around his waist in a fierce hug. Luminescent tears streaked down her face. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling, "for everything." Dylan's eyes stung, his throat tight with emotion. He returned the embrace, his voice a hoarse whisper. "I'll come visit you, kid, I promise." The shuttle's engines roared to life, carrying Nox towards her new life among the stars. Dylan watched through the viewport as the craft disappeared into the vast expanse of space, a bittersweet mixture of relief and loss washing over him. The Pandronian mob slowly dispersed, their anger replaced by confusion and uncertainty. Dylan stood alone on the tarmac, the weight of his actions settling on his shoulders. He knew that his choices would have far-reaching consequences, not just for himself, but for the fragile balance between humanity and the Pandronians. As he gazed up at the starry sky, Dylan couldn't help but wonder what the future held. The universe was vast and full of mysteries, and humanity had only just begun to explore its infinite possibilities. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.